Hello, brothers and sisters. Welcome back to the Based LDS video. This is your boy BC. I hope you had a great weekend, a great Sabbath, and I hope the beginning to your week has been wonderful as well. Moving into summer here. Everything's finally green and beautiful, and the tourists are coming into town, so things are definitely picking up. Let's go ahead and just jump in real quick. We're going to be continuing our look at the first vision. And we're jumping into the third version of the first account, which is the main version that the world is familiar with, because it is the version published in our Pearl of Great Price in the Scriptures. So we need to be aware that this is going to be the most heavily thought out version of the first vision. It is taken from the large volume of Joseph Smith's history. He was compiling his life story in the late 1830s, early 1840s. This would be a large bound volume, I believe 6 volumes, something to that effect. That would contain a lot of the details of his life and everything he went through as a young man up to establishing and then becoming the prophet of the church and up to the day he died. So we're going to go to Joseph Smith Papers, again at josephsmithpapers.org. We're going to scroll down to the middle and bottom of the page, Accounts of Joseph Smith's First Vision. And here you go. And then again, we're going to go to the third version. Now, I want to say one other thing. This is, because it is the most thought out, this is the most drafted and redrafted, written and rewritten. So we're going to click here on Joseph Smith History, the third link. And this will bring you to the handwritten version that you can see on the website. I want to do this real quick. This is what I mean by different versions, different drafts made of this particular version of his story. And I want to point out this 1841 fair copy. One of Joseph's scribes, a gentleman by the last name of Corre, I forget his first name offhand, made a fair copy. And this is a copy of the final version that's done without editorial remarks, revisions, so on and so forth. So this would have been the final perfected copy. He did not complete the full copy of the Joseph Smith history. He stopped after about 100 pages, I think it was. And then I think he resumed the work years later, which is why you get 1838 to 1856, because that's when the Joseph Smith history was written and compiled. But you do have this long-term project and the detailing and chronicling of Joseph Smith's life. So let's go back out of that and go back into the accounts. Whoops, took me out too far. All right, back into the third account. And now let's get rid of the handwritten and go into the transcript. Now, this does start, and again, draft 2, that's just the one this opens up to the most. He was born in 1805. He tells of moving to Palmyra in Manchester, in the county of Ontario, later to be New York. And he introduces his family. And then he opens up with this. Sometime in the second year after our removal to Manchester, there was in the place we lived an unusual excitement on the subject of religion. It commenced with the Methodist, but soon became general among all the sects in that region of country. Indeed, the whole district of the country seemed affected by it, and great multitudes united themselves to different religious parties, which created no small stir and division among the people, some crying "Lo here" and "Lo there." Some were contending for the Methodist faith, some for the Presbyterian, and some for the Baptist. For notwithstanding the great love which their converts to these different faiths expressed at the time of their conversion, and the great zeal manifested by the respective clergy who were active in getting up and promoting this extraordinary scene of religious feeling in order to have everyone converted, as they were pleased to call it, let them join whatever sect they pleased. Yet when the converts began to began to file off to one party and some to another, it was seen that the seemingly good feelings of both the priests and their converts were mere pretense, more pretended than real. For a scene of great confusion and bad feeling ensued. Priest contending up against priest, and convert against convert, so that all their good feelings, one for another, if they ever had any, were entirely lost in a strife of words and a contest about opinions. It was at this time in my 15th year, my father's family was proselyted to the Presbyterian faith, and 4 of them joined that church, namely, Mother, Lucy, my brothers Hiram, Samuel Harrison, and my sister Sophronia. During the time of great excitement, my mind was called up to serious reflection and great uneasiness. But though my feelings were deep and often pungent, I kept them to myself, aloof from all the parties, though I attended their several meetings as occasion would permit. But in process of time, my mind became somewhat partial to the Methodist sect, and I felt some desire to be united with them. But so great was the confusion and strife amongst the different denominations that it was impossible for a person, young as I was, and so unacquainted with men and things to come to any certain conclusion, who was right and who's wrong. My mind at different times was greatly excited, for the cry and tumult were so great and incessant. The Presbyterians were most decided against the Baptists and Methodists, and used all their powers of either reason or sophistry to prove their errors, or at least to make people think they were in error. On the other hand, the Baptists and Methodists, in their turn, were equally zealous in endeavoring to establish their own tenets and disprove all others. It was in the midst of this war of words and tumult of opinions, I often said to myself, what is to be done? Who of all these parties are right, or are they all wrong together? And if any one of them be right, which is it, and how shall I know it? While I was laboring under the extreme difficulties caused by the contest of these parties of religionists, I was one day reading in the Epistle of James, 1st chapter and 5th verse, which reads, If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, that giveth to all men liberally, and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him. Never did any passage of Scripture come with more power to the heart of man than this did at this time to mine. It seemed to enter with great force into every feeling of my heart. I reflected on it again and again, knowing that if any person needed wisdom from God, I did. For how to act I did not know, and unless I could get more wisdom than I had, I would never know. For the teachers of religion of the different sects understood the same passage of Scripture so differently as to destroy all confidence in settling the question by an appeal to the Bible. At length I came to the conclusion that I must either remain in darkness and confusion, or else I must do as James directs, that is, ask of God. I at last came to the determination to ask of God, concluding that if he gave wisdom to them that lacked wisdom, he would give liberally and not upbraid it. I might venture. So in accordance with this my determination to ask of God, I retired to the woods to make the attempt. It was on the morning of a beautiful clear day in the early spring of 1820. It was the first time in my life that I had made such an attempt, for amidst all my anxieties, I had never yet made the attempt to pray vocally. After I had retired to the place where I had previously designed to go, having looked around me and finding myself alone, I kneeled down and began to offer up the desires of my heart to God. I had scarcely done so when immediately I was seized upon by some power which entirely overcame me, and had such astonishing influence over me as to bind my tongue so that I could not speak. Thick darkness gathered around me, and it seemed to me for a time as if I were doomed to sudden destruction. But exerting all my powers to call upon God to deliver me out of the power of this enemy which had seized upon me, and at that very moment when I was ready to sink into despair and abandon myself to destruction, not to an imaginary ruin, but to the power of some actual being from the unseen world, who had such a marvelous power as I had never before felt in any being. Just at this moment of great alarm, I saw a pillar of light exactly over my head above the brightness of the sun, which descended gradually until it fell upon me. It no sooner appeared than I found myself delivered from the enemy which held me bound. When the light rested upon me, I saw 2 personages, whose brightness and glory defy all description, standing above me in the air. One of them spake unto me, calling me by name, and said, pointing to the other, This is my beloved Son, Hear him. My object in going to inquire of the Lord was to know which of all the sects was right, that I might know which to join. No sooner, therefore, did I get possession of myself as to be able to speak, than I asked the personages who stood above me in the light, which of all the sects was right. For at this time it had never entered into my heart that all were wrong, and which I should join. I was answered that I must join none of them, for they were all wrong, and the personage who addressed me said that all their creeds were an abomination in his sight, that those professors were all corrupt. That they teach for doctrines the commandments of men, having a form of godliness, but they deny the power thereof. He again forbade me to join with any of them, and many other things did he say unto me, which I cannot write at this time. When I came to myself again, I found myself lying on my back, looking up into heaven. Some few days after I had this vision, I happened to be in a company with one of the Methodist preachers who was very active, and he before mentioned religious excitement. And conversing with him on the subject of religion, I took occasion to give him an account of the vision which I had. I was greatly surprised at his behavior. He treated my communication not only lightly, but with great contempt, saying it was all of the devil, that there was no such thing as visions or revelations in these days, that all such things had ceased with the apostles, and there never would be any more of them. I soon found, however, that my telling the story had excited a great deal of prejudice against me among professors of religion, and was the cause of great persecution, which continued to increase. And though I was an obscure boy, only between 14 and 15 years of age, and my circumstances in life such as to make a boy of no consequence in the world, yet men of high standing would take notice sufficiently to excite the public mind against me, and create a hot persecution. And this was common among all the sects, all united to persecute me. It has often caused me serious reflection, both then and since, how very strange it was that an obscure boy of a little over 14 years of age, and one who is doomed to the necessity of maintaining scanty maintenance, of obtaining a scanty maintenance by his daily labor, should be thought a character of sufficient importance to attract the attention of the great ones of the most popular sects of the day, so as to create in them a spirit of the bitterest persecution and reviling. And I'm going to stop there. There's more to it. He compares himself a little bit to Paul, telling Agrippa of his vision, and no one believing. And then he gets into the years between the first vision of Moroni and Moroni. So we're going to stop there. And let's compare this to the first two accounts that we've already seen, shall we? He talks about being young, moving at the age of 10 to Manchester. And about 2 years after, there is an excitement. So you do get the idea here he's 12, but he's 14 when he prays. So it's not explicit, but there is an implicit mention of the fact that he's struggling with the idea of religion for a couple years. Again, I like how in the first account, that is explicitly stated. He's right out with it. When I was 12, I began to worry about the welfare of my soul. When I was 14 or 15, I went out to pray. It's implied here, but you do see that he's searching and that he's pondering and he's putting time and energy into the search for which religion to join. He does not mention his definite belief in the existence of a God the way he did in the first version, owing to nature and the account of the movements of the stars, the regularity and order, symmetry, that while such things were framed in such a way in the heavens, the earth was all a turmoil. But you do see that he is deeply entrenched on the feeling that there is a God. He never says, I didn't think there was a God, or I was checking the Bible to see if there was a God. He's like, for him, though, it's implied again. I'm looking at the Bible to know how I might best worship God. That's what you do when you join a religious denomination, correct? You look for their way, the most correct way in your heart and mind to worship God. So, again, he's not explicitly saying, I knew there was a God, but there's no reason to have any doubt that he's like, well, maybe there's a God. There's none of that tone in here. And he does a lot more service to the description of the rivalries between the various denominations of Christianity in his area that are vying for converts. You get much more detail, excuse me, cold medicine. You get much more detail here about his search, about what he's looking for, about what he's wanting. He does not, as he does in the first and second version, talk about his anxiety for the welfare of his soul. But you have to, again, it's implied, but you have to imagine, why else put so much energy into a religious denomination to join? If you're not looking for the best way to worship because you want your soul to be the most correct when you stand before God at the final day. How to best worship. Where to go for instruction. So he is taking these things serious, even at so young an age. He's letting you know it's the Presbyterians, Baptists, and Methodists who were the main preachers in that area at this time. And he lets you know, the first version, he doesn't really mention at all. Second version, he reads a couple of the scriptures to you. But this one, he's very clear. The Epistle of James, 1st chapter, 5th verse, which reads, if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God. There was something about this that struck him more. And I think that's why he does more to give this lip service and attention in this version. I think there's something about this particular verse that struck him. I think this is where he gets the idea of go to God and ask. The priests, they're each interpreting scripture differently, but there was something, Joseph read this scripture and went, okay. Excuse me. So he's reflecting on this again and again. It's not just, hey, I should pray. It's, should I pray? How should I do it? Where should I go? He's reflecting on this. He's asking himself a lot of questions. He's looking for direction. So he decided he would ask of God because God does give wisdom. That's the promise. And that he'll give it to you freely. No arguments, no complaints, no beatings, no judgments, no nothing. So he very well understands what he needs to do. Now, this is also the version where you get the most detail compared to the first two about his wrestle with, I'll say, Satan, who would most definitely want to stop Joseph from issuing a prayer, from seeking truth and getting an answer, right? He wants to scare you. He wants to disappoint you. He wants to discourage you. Satan does not want us praying, and if we're praying, he does not want us getting answers. He doesn't want us putting our heart and our soul into these things. So the object is to frighten Joseph as best he can at so young an age. But Joseph's natural response is to exert himself to fully call upon the Lord. And at first, you can tell it doesn't work for him because he believes he's being given up to the powers of darkness, that they're about to swallow him up. And at the last moment, when he feels his destruction is upon him, that's when he sees a light. Now, here's some things. I saw a pillar of light exactly over my head above the brightness of the sun. The first two versions, he likens it to fire. The second version, remember, he says nothing consumed because he really expects this light to just burn things up. You don't get that same justice for the light. However, he is more descriptive about the fact that he met two personages. To me, that's obvious with the first reading. Or with the first reading, it's obvious that he received instructions from Christ. The second reading, he makes it clear, I saw two personages, and one of them spake to me. He's very clear about what he's told here and why he's told it. It's not the people practicing the religion. These people are not damned. They're not consigned to hell. They're not lost. It is the teachings that are damned. It is the teachings that are heresy, and that the people can be saved. And they promised Joseph more revelation with time. But he is told at that point in time, join none because of the creeds and the abominations, and that because they deny the power of godliness and they issue commandments of men, rather. So, this is something that the churches of this day and back then could not abide. They cannot abide the fact that for hundreds of years they have been leading people astray, supposedly in the name of God. But we need to understand these sects and denominations can't agree among themselves what the scriptures mean. They each have different interpretations, which is why you have, again, Presbyterian, Methodist, Baptist, and then fill in all the others that aren't maybe as prevalent in the Manchester, Palmyra area at this time. And Joseph again comes back to the pushback he got when he told a Methodist preacher about his vision. It's of the devil. Never mind it. Forget it. It cannot be. God does not work that way anymore. So Joseph moves on. So brothers and sisters, I do want to say again, the consistencies between the first, second, and third visions are remarkable. Yes, there are differences, but there's nothing to tell you, there's nothing to even intimate that Joseph is lying or changing his story on the fly. He's telling it to people according to what they need to hear. The first vision, I saw Jesus, he told me to join none of them. Second vision, I saw two persons, one of them told me to join none. This vision, I saw two persons, and it was their brightness and glory defy all description rather than the light around them. So you see that they're the source of the light, is what I like about this as well. And that one introduces the other testifying of him. And then the other one shows up and shows who he is and issues commandments. That the church might be established down the line. That people might be able to return to the right ways of God. So brothers and sisters, again, this is a short video, but I do hope that it will, that as we study these versions, you'll see that the story's the same. There are differences, but think about the stories you've told to people, the testimonies you've borne more than once, and how you've left certain details out, added certain details in, how maybe the fog of memory might affect you. But you're telling what you have to tell to suit the needs of the audience at that time. Joseph's doing the same thing here. There are no discrepancies. There's nothing here to impeach Joseph's testimony or his character. So brothers and sisters, that's it for me. I'll have another video out to you in a couple days. I love you. I hope you guys are. I hope you folks are having a great week, and I hope that reviewing these accounts of the first vision are helpful. Love you all. Peace out.